Today, the 11th of November, we commemorate an event that was solemn at its time and solemn still, even with the passing of so many years. The declaration of the armistice, the end of hostilities in the First World War in 1918, was something that still has a ring of significance right down to our present age. Nearly 20 million people, military personnel and civilians, who died in the First World War, people who were left forever changed, whole generations of people left bereaved and left to face a future, and soon, as we know, even in their lifetime, to confront hostilities of, in some respects, even worse nature in the Second World War. So what can we take out of a reflection about events that are so long in the past? I'm sitting under a board that says, "For God, King and Country," as the motivation of those who are members of this parish church here in Melbourne who died in those hostilities, went to war, and many of whom lost their life. Because clearly at the time, people understood that there was much at stake. There was a sense of God's purposes, of the order of human society being challenged. Certainly the sovereignty of a political order and the integrity of national borders that seemed to be likely to be forever changed. Europe at the time of the First World War was coming out of a reasonably long period of peace for that continent, coming out of the peace that was brokered through the Congress of Vienna in the post-Napoleonic era that had shaped more or less a pattern of alliances and national boundaries that endured with some eruptions of violence throughout a century. And yet here, at this time, 1914 and during that period, right up to 1918, there was hostilities that seemed to escalate in a way that was beyond imagination. We know that people went to war saying they'll be back in a few months. We'll be back before Christmas, not imagining the awful sacrifice and cost of suffering that would be exacted from so many people, both the combatants and those who are left behind. I suspect that we might not quite use that same language today. We would wonder about the confidence of people who claim that a military conflict that they are part of is entirely in accordance with God's will. In fact, the Western world is dealing with a severe threat, and people who use that kind of language in the context of ISIS or Daesh in the Middle East. So I think we're all rather more circumspect about the certainties that underlie war. But we know that there are things that people are often called to sacrifice for. The integrity of their own life, the way that their communities are organised, the threats that can come to it. And so, even though it was understood at the end of the First World War that it was a war to end all wars, conflicts, other things, some more awful, have continued and continue right up to our own day. One of the things that I reflect on is that here is something, and war in general is something that humans could, in one way, stop in an instant. Eventually they stop, but only after so much suffering that one side, completely defeated, humiliated, is brought to a negotiation, a laying down of arms of peace. But at any time, and even before the hostilities start, there's the opportunity of people using their wisdom, their negotiating skills, their thirst for peace to end up with a very different outcome. And I think that should be the takeaway lesson for all of us about what God desires for us as we engage in our world. To be people who seek for peace, who have the courage to reach out and to help construct it. There will be, possibly in the future, we don't know, conflicts of that scale. It's an awful thought to imagine. But if there is, I hope that there are people well on the way to it who will speak for peace, who will take their courage forward to mitigate against those who think that war is an easy outcome to an insoluble conflict. So use this time as a time of remembrance, a time to think about those who gave the sacrifice, people of a different age, a different era, people who, for God, King and Country, left the Australian shores to lay down their lives in pursuit of things that they thought were the most important thing that they could be involved in.